Today's episode is proudly sponsored by the Rising Tide Mastermind. The term mastermind was originally written in Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich. Before that, the earliest documentation that we have of a mastermind group was Ben Franklin's group that he used to meet every single week in a tavern that he called Huntus. Nation, there's no doubt about it. Life is too short to do it alone, and it's not very much fun to do it alone in. Nation, I urge you to go to scalinguph2o.com and find out if the Rising Tide Mastermind is right for you. I'd love to have a 15-minute call with you to explain all things Rising Tide Mastermind and see if this is a group that's right for you and you are right for the group. Go to scalinguph2o.com/mastermind. Welcome to Scaling Up H2O, the podcast where we scale up on knowledge so we don't scale up our systems. Trace Blackmore here, your host, and I want to talk about scaling up. You know, you can obviously hear how that's a play on words. Of course, if we scale up a system, nobody likes that. That reduces capacity, that increases the energy demand of whatever equipment we are treating. And customers normally don't like that, and that means we don't like that. Our job is to make sure that things are as efficient as possible. And if you have heard me teach what this job is, we are heat transfer efficiency managers. Everything we do is about heat transfer. Everything that we do is about making that equipment as energy efficient and water efficient as possible. And that translates into two things. The first thing is we make that equipment as cheap to operate as possible. So we are a green industry. We're the original green industry. We are saving our customers green. Now, I know we have listeners in 90 plus countries, and not everybody's currency is green. Here in the United States, our currency, our dollars are green. So I would ask all the people listening in other countries, and I am amazed at how that number grows each and every episode. And that's because of everybody out there in the Scaling Up Nation telling people about this podcast. So thank you for everybody that continues to do that. So even if your money is not green, think of the United States money. You can borrow that image. We are saving our customers green. But what is that green going to buy? Well, it's going to buy water. It's going to buy energy. It's going to buy all of the things we might need to use to clean the system, to right whatever we wronged or whatever has wronged in the system so we can get back efficiency. So we are saving that customer and that building and that facility all of the resources that have to go into running that plant. Now, we call that a lot the carbon footprint. When we talk about how much energy we're using, we know we have a global water crisis, so we are saving water. And of course, all the downtime and all the things that cost the customer even more money, we are saving them with that. So if you've never thought about what your job is, now I don't care what's on your business card, and I hope you have an amazing title on your business card because you deserve it, but really behind whatever that title is, what it really should say and what you need to know that you do is you manage the efficiency of heat transfer. And we are saving our customers green no matter how they or you define that. To even further split that down, that means your program is costing them far less than all of the savings that you provide. Your program is probably the most scrutinized bill that whatever department is paying that bill is looking at because they don't understand it. They don't understand all of the things that come from you providing the excellent water treatment service that you provide for that customer. They don't know the things that we just spoke about in this podcast, and it is your challenge. This is my call to action for you, that you let that customer know your value. And if you don't know what your value is, the call to action for you is for you to determine how you are valuable to each and every customer that you come in contact with. And here's a little spoiler alert. You are a heat transfer efficiency manager. So look at your job. Look at everything that you do through that lens, and it will instantly become clear on how you explain your value to your customer. And I want everybody to think, when was the last time that they did that, and try to make today's interaction the day that you start doing that. Make sure the customer appreciates everything that you do to make it more efficient for everything that they do in that plant. And if you don't tell them, I promise they will never know. And when you shift your relationship to your customer so they view you as a heat transfer efficiency manager, I promise every communication you have with them from that day forward will be different, because you change the lens in which they look at you. Nation, one of the things that I hope you do is always talk about your value. When you are thinking about your day, always do it in the value that you bring. I promise that thought will change every other thought. As we do each and every episode, we bring you some of the events that you might want to look into to increase your knowledge about this industry. And Nation, I want to give a shout out to all the Scaling Up Nation listeners, because this is an idea that came from the nation. There is so much going on out there. How do we keep track? Maybe we're just looking at one independent industry. Maybe we're just looking at one association. Well, now we've got blinders to all the other things that are going on out there. So the awesome staff here at Scaling Up H2O, they are on a mission to find out as much water-related conferences and activities and bring them to you. And of course, we do that each and every week. And if you miss any of those weeks, or you want to get more information, because let's face it, we're driving from account to account, be safe while you're listening to this podcast. And always know you can go to scalinguph2o.com and go to our events page to learn everything you want to know about what we mentioned here today and everything that is coming up in our industry. So the 2023 BOMA International Conference and Expo is taking place June 24th through 27th in Kansas City, Missouri. From groundbreaking building technologies to new occupant expectations, the new phase of hybrid work environments to promising decarbonizing efforts is all about the BOMA International Conference and Expo. So if this is something that interests you, you know where to go. We are going to have this on our show events page. Also coming up is the 10th International Water Association Membrane Technology Conference and Exhibition for Water and Wastewater Treatment. This is taking place July 23rd through 26th in St. Louis, Missouri. This is hosted by the International Water Association, and this conference brings scientists and professionals together around membrane technology in the water sector. So to find out more about this, of course, we'll have that on our show notes page. And then finally, one of my favorite organizations to promote is the Association of Water Technologies, and the AWT annual convention is taking place October 4th through 7th in the Amway Grand Hotel in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Folks, this is one that I am attending, and I hope to see you there. Always great presentations. Of course, a lot of the presentations that turn into podcast interviews come from this conference. So I'm always walking around. I'm always having a microphone in my hand. Maybe I will have a chance to interview you. So I hope you have that on your calendar. For all these events and more, again, scalinguph2o.com, and you can go to our events page. You know, speaking of walking around the AWT and just finding out what's going on and sharing that with the Scaling Up Nation, we have had so many other industries reach out to us for us to help bring awareness around their events. And I just think that's amazing. I think that shows how the Scaling Up Nation is growing, and how when we all learn more, the entire industry gets better. And there's so many people out there that want to make the industry better. And those people are joining the Scaling Up Nation. So thank you for all those other organizations out there that are reaching out to us and giving us more information so we can share with the Scaling Up Nation. And Nation, thank you for listening to this podcast. Not many shows go by without me asking you, the Scaling Up Nation, to reach out to me and give me your ideas so we can have thousands of Scaling Up H2O episodes in our future. Well, I don't know if you know this, but I also ask my guests that very question. And one of our guests introduced us with our upcoming guests that you are getting ready to meet. And that takes a village. So please, Nation, if you have a topic or a guest that you want us to reach out to, go to scalinguph2o.com, navigate over to our show ideas page, and we will continue to produce this content so you can get better one episode at a time. Well, Nation, our next guest is in the irrigation industry. And I know we are dedicated to the industrial water treatment industry, but I can't tell you how many of our customers have asked us to help them out on the irrigation side, or they don't understand things that they can do on the irrigation side to save water like we know how to do on the industrial side. And there is no reason why we can't cross streams. So Nation, here's our interview. My lab partner today is Andy Humphrey of the Sprinkler Supply Store and self-proclaimed sprinkler nerd. Andy, welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast.
Trace, thank you so much for having me today. And I love how you called me your lab partner. That's fantastic.
I started doing that when we first started the show, and it just stuck.
Yeah, I actually think life is just an experiment. So in terms of like how I approach every day and what I do, this is just one big experiment. So I'm right on board with that.
Awesome. Well, we have a lot to talk about today, and I'm trying to think where to start, but I want to talk to our audience and make sure that we're all on the same page, that regardless of how we're using water, it's everybody's charge to make sure we're using the smallest amount as possible. And I looked up online. Of course, Google never lies to us, so we know this is a right answer. 9 to 10 billion gallons of water a day are used in irrigation. And I just find that an incredible number. And I'm willing to bet that most of that irrigation is probably not optimized. And there's a lot of runoff and it's not being used properly and the equipment's outdated and all of that stuff. And you're going to tell me, no, I'm wrong. There's rainbows and birds are singing. Everything's fine.
No, you're totally right. We undervalue water. And so I think that is an enabler for poor quality irrigation systems and poor operating irrigation systems. And what I find really interesting is that as you drive around your city, your small town, your neighborhood, you likely, as a majority, see poorly operating systems than you do correctly operating systems. And here where I live in Traverse City, Michigan, it's right on Lake Michigan. And I see sprinklers running into, late into November, always running in the rain, like really low-hanging opportunities to reduce water usage that doesn't take a lot of technology, yet we still let it happen.
Coming to the office this morning, I saw that very thing. Matter of fact, a sprinkler head had popped off and it has been running for at least 2 days.
Yeah. So if we were to fast forward, let's say some period of time, I can't say if 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, probably more like 5 minimum, that won't happen anymore. Meaning there'll be technology in that system that immediately shuts it down when that happens. And that technology is available today. It just happens to be very expensive. And that's part of, undervaluing water. If water goes up in price, then all of a sudden these technologies become a lot more realistic. But right now they're still a bit more expensive for your average, residential site.
I interviewed somebody on this podcast from Israel, and water is very expensive over there. And a lot of the new ways of thinking on how we can better use water comes from there for that reason, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and something as simple as right now, the water flows to your building, your house, your building, your park. Water is, in a strange way, unlimited, right? You can turn the water on and it will flow for the most part. And so I think maybe what we need to do is flip that upside down and say, Trace, here's how much water you get. Do what you want with it. Because then you can start to make decisions like, you know what? Maybe the back part of this property, it can go a little bit. That grass can go dormant. I want to keep the front green. But right now, we really don't make any prioritization decisions because the water just flows and then it becomes just a financial dollar decision. But water flows all the time. If you want it, it's there.
Yeah, we get asked all the time. Of course, the listeners of this podcast normally cooling towers, boilers, closed hydronic systems. So we're in buildings and facilities working on that. And people will come and ask us, hey, you do water. Well, help us with this irrigation system. So I know sometimes we do get involved with that. So I'm hoping around today's show, we can give people some better information so they can help guide their customers. And ultimately, the goal is we're all using water more effectively.
Absolutely. That's the idea. Especially when it regards to growing something, right? Growing an agricultural crop or growing a landscape crop, i.e. turf grass, trees, and shrubs, is that there's something called the plant water requirement. And so the goal is really to give that plant exactly what that plant needs to grow optimally.
Well, before we get into all of that, would you mind letting the Scaling Up Nation know a bit about Andy Humphrey?
Sure. Let's do the 60-second version, which is I was okay in school, not an A student, but didn't really like it. And so I focused on things that I could be successful at, which is really creative things, building things. So I went to architecture school, switched to landscape architecture school, got into my first job in 2002 as a CAD jockey for a landscape company, teaching other landscape architects at the company how to use CAD. I met an irrigation professional who's still, my best friend today and Sprinkler Nerd 2, my partner in crime. His name's Paul Bassett. And that's when I learned about this irrigation industry. And one of the first things I asked Paul is, how does the irrigation controller know when it's time to water? And of course, 2002, this was 20 years ago, I learned that it operates on an alarm clock because it's Monday at 7 a.m. And so I started to ask more questions. I was very curious about this. And that's really what led me down the path of irrigation. As soon as I learned how irrigation systems worked, I immediately saw an opportunity and stopped doing landscape architecture and went headfirst into irrigation. And, specifically the technology side, which at that time and even today revolves around the control systems. And so I've worked with many different manufacturers' control systems, implementing them in cities and commercial facilities and bringing this type of control systems to market. And it was really because I saw what was going to happen in the industry and how we were using water and how there really was not any technology in the irrigation industry. Okay. And then you layer on me realizing that I'm an entrepreneur, learning how to sell things online in the early 2000s, building e-commerce stores, launching Sprinkler Supply Store in 2010, which I'm now a joint venture with a large company called Site One Landscape Supply. And we have a fully integrated e-commerce stack into their ERP system and into their brick and mortar stores where we can fulfill from the shelf. And so I've kind of went headfirst into the irrigation industry technology and mixed that in with both the hardware side of the industry and the software side.
So, with all of that, I'm thinking of the sprinkler system that we have here at the office. And it is probably from the early 2000s. And when we bought the building, I think it's a Hunter system. Mm-hmm. And it had nothing on it but, as you said, an alarm clock. And I went online and I found that we could add just a rain detector to it. And just by doing that, we were using a lot less water to irrigate. And with that, I can only imagine what they can do today.
So here's the interesting thing is they can do more, but basically they're the same. They haven't changed that much. And I, applaud you for using a rain sensor because they are a fantastic tool. If installed correctly and maintained correctly, they're very inexpensive, less than $100. They're wireless. They take you 15 minutes to install. And that's really the way that we should look at rain is money falling from the sky. Because when it's raining, you should not be irrigating. And then there's a period after it rains, kind of like a delay where depending on your soil type and how much volume it rained, you can not water for an extended period of time after that. And that's really sort of the next evolution of the rain sensor is it actually dries out pretty quick. The tech in the rain sensor is just simply a contact switch. A little disc swells up, it trips the switch, it turns off. But the rain sensor being in the sky doesn't know how much of that rain landed into the soil and how long it's going to take for that soil to dry out. And so that being said, the next sort of evolution, if you will, that's coming is better and easier to deploy soil moisture sensors.
So instead of just detecting what's falling from the sky, it's actually measuring how much water's in the soil?
Correct. Yeah, because the rain sensor is the right tool for turning this system off. Because to turn it off, you need something in the sky that can measure rain in the sky. But if you want to know when it's time to turn the sprinklers back on, you need a sensor in the soil profile that says, all right, we're dry enough now. Now it's time to come back on.
I'm assuming my cheap little 2004 circuit system is probably not able to take that on. So does that mean I need to upgrade the system?
It means that there is not really the technology available today on the what you might call residential and light commercial. This technology is available for your higher end, larger scale properties. And I've been fortunate enough to have helped build a company called Baseline Control Systems, which is now owned by HydroPoint Data Systems. And Baseline has patented soil moisture sensors that we've deployed on all kinds of large-scale commercial and municipal properties. But again, that price point, it's in the thousands of dollars, not the hundreds of dollars. And so as we fast forward 5 years, we're going to see this tech move down into the residential scale where perhaps for $200 or less, you could add, maybe some wireless sensors to your system at your office or your house.
Yeah, that seems like that is definitely an improvement. So I look forward to that. So we are not wasting water here or at our home. A lot of our customers will come up to us and they'll ask us how we can be more efficient with water. And one of the first things that we do, and I'm assuming most municipalities have this, but they'll give a sewer credit for the water that is not being returned back to the sewer. And we always ask them to apply for that for their cooling tower and also their irrigation. Is that a thing all over the United States, or is that just in certain municipalities?
I believe it's all over. However, there are likely municipalities that don't honor that, but that is true. A sewer deduct meter is definitely an advantage. And from what I understand, and you might know more because you're more in the municipal side, but I believe that something like 2/3 of the water bill is sewer,
Right.
and 1/3 is water. So you can have immediate deduction by doing that.
What is the equipment that needs to be in place in order for the municipality to grant a credit like that?
I believe you just have to apply for the meter and then have a licensed plumber install the meter that the city needs, and then they read that meter. So if you have a home or a commercial building, you would have two meters, your water meter and then your water deduct meter or your sewer deduct meter.
I'm assuming that there are electronics that will help monitor those meters and probably also report when you've hit the ROI and how much money you're saving.
Yes. I'm laughing because that's what a normal person thinks. And I say that lightly because that's the way it should work. But that's not the way that it actually works today. And that you're talking about some technology and hardware and analytics that's coming, but it's not really readily available today. And so with that in mind, my first suggestion would be to put a meter on the irrigation system or a flow sensor so that you know how much water you're using and get your water bills and track and trend that data. And if you know how much water you're using and you use something simple like the square foot of irrigated area, you can kind of know with a couple calculations how well you're doing, whether you're using 2x the water you should be per square foot, or whether you're right on, or whether you're not using enough. But almost all irrigation equipment today doesn't do any of this. The human has to come in, the trained human who knows what it is I'm talking about here has to come visit a site, set all this up, and help that property owner, property manager. But it's not readily available in the irrigation industry.
That is really surprising to me.
Yeah, so it's coming. You're talking about the next evolution is that data and analytics infrastructure that needs to be added to the irrigation system, because most irrigation systems are still alarm clocks, a little bit better than that turn solenoid valves on and off at a specific time for a specific amount of time.
I remember I was so excited when we had a sprinkler system. I'd never had one before, and I got on YouTube. I tried to learn everything I could about how to make it use the least amount of water possible so we didn't get runoff. It was just going where it needed to. And I remember I had pie plates that I was using. I'm sure I wasn't doing that correctly. So from the sprinkler nerd, what does everybody need to know in order to properly set up just their system at home?
So the first thing they should think about, we're in April right now, okay? So in a lot of the country, sprinkler systems are coming on for the first time right now. However, the water demand from the plants right now is not heavy because it's cooler. They're just coming out of dormancy. And what happens with sprinkler systems right now is they get turned on in April and they run the same all season and then get shut off in October. Okay, so the same amount of water is applied Monday, Wednesday, Friday, from April all the way through till October when it's turned off. But that's not how the weather works. The weather starts to get warmer and peaks in, let's say, July as the highest water demand time period. And then it curves off again. And so if you were going to be applying the right amount of water, you would use a lot less in the spring, let's say 50% less right now. And then in the summer, you would use more, and then in the fall, you would taper it off. So it kind of looks like a bell curve. The actual water usage is like a bell curve, not a flat line. So that is, if you're going to do it by hand, that's what you can do, right? Right now, either go to 1 day a week or turn your time down by 50%. And then as you go towards summer, start increasing the frequency or increasing the runtime. And then as we go towards fall, start decreasing it. And there are controllers that do that today. So that's called an ET curve, evapotranspiration. And that's the word that describes the water loss through the soil and the water loss through the plant transpiration. It's essentially the plant water demand. And you can automate that with something called an ET controller. And that is something that is readily available. And I would say for no more than $200, you can have a residential controller that does that. Commercial properties, again, you're going to look for something that is more industrial and it's going to cost more than a couple $100, but you can automate the watering based on the weather.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm going to look into that as soon as I get off of our interview here. Do you think that we're going to start seeing more public policy where they're saying you cannot use water, you can't have so much runoff, and now we're going to be responsible for doing some of the things we talked about in the very beginning of this interview? Are there municipalities that are thinking about doing that, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, they're absolutely already doing it by either telling you can only water on odd days of the week or even days of the week, things like that. I think it'll become a question of what's the right approach to that. And I don't know what the right approach is. I think that limiting somebody's time that they can water isn't necessarily the right approach, because if you can water on Thursday, you could water all day long if you want to. And some people do. They don't realize that there's only so much water that the soil can hold. After that, it's wasted water. I think an interesting approach might be instead to just allocate the amount of water. Here's how many gallons you get based on your square footage of landscaped area. Do what you want with it. Give the owner, the user, a choice on what they do with the water instead. And then you can start to make some decisions, just like everybody has a budget, family budget, business budget, travel budget, whatever that is. And then you make choices based on what's going to fit in your budget. And when you start to look at it that way, you start to ask some really interesting questions. Like I mentioned in the beginning of our talk, questions like, what are my priorities? Can I prioritize my landscape? Are there high priority areas of the building that I absolutely want to be green and lush all the time? And are there areas of the property that can go dormant so that if I only have X number of gallons to use, I'll apply that where I think it matters most. And maybe that area behind the warehouse, that grass can go dormant. It's not going to die. It goes dormant. It'll come back. Nobody sees it. But right now, we don't prioritize any of the landscape. We just water all of it.
There are companies out there that are catching their runoff and then using that in their irrigation systems. What does somebody need to know in order to do something like that? And what are the pros and the cons of doing that?
I think that what a lot of people don't realize is just how many gallons of water a landscape needs. And so you could say the same thing about catching rain. Now, what's interesting about catching rain is sometimes when you catch the rain, the landscape doesn't need it because it just rained. And when you're in a drought and you need the water, there's no rain. So it can be a catch-22. And I think just understanding the pure volume of water that that the landscape requires, and just understanding how much that is, because if you could have a secondary source, so we like to call those secondary sources, whatever that secondary source might be, then you may apply that to certain areas of the landscape, but you might not use it for the entire landscape because it might not be enough for the whole landscape.
I remember seeing a sign where somebody did that very thing, and then they put out saying that we're irrigating from a natural spring. So not really, but I think it made everybody feel good. With runoff, with all the things that are collected as the water's running to wherever that reservoir is, do we need to be concerned that it's collecting something that's going to be hazardous to put back on the landscape?
Yeah, I believe that every local municipality has their own code of how well that water needs to be treated. And it does need to be treated to some specification. And again, I don't know what those are. It's different for every area. And that does add to the cost to treat that water. A lot of times it's treated through the pump station or through the pumping infrastructure. If you're at your house and you're collecting rain off the gutter, then you're on your own. You can do what you want with that, I believe. And again, it's not a lot of volume, but it might be enough if you're catching it on your house to just water your flower beds, perhaps.
What are some of the things that you want everybody to know that's listening about sprinkler systems?
I would say number one is realize the volume of water. Okay, so if you were to look at 1 acre, and the general rule of thumb is that cool season turf grass requires 1 inch, okay, 1 inch of water. And this is also interesting because when you think of a sprinkler system, we all think about time. Okay, how long is this particular zone going to water for? Well, I set my timer for about 30 minutes every other day. But most people don't have any idea how much water that is. They just know that it's 30 minutes, but they don't know how much they applied because they don't know the precipitation rate of the sprinkler. And so the general rule of thumb is 1 inch of water, per week. And over 1 acre, that's 28,000 gallons of water, right? 1 acre inch is 28,000 gallons of water. And most people don't have any idea that it is that much. And that would be per week over 1 acre.
That's a huge number. So, knowing that information, what do we do to make sure that everybody can just go home today and they can impact that number? What do they need to know to do that?
Well, if they want to go home today and impact the number, let's define impact the number. I'll just assume that means use less water.
Yes.
Okay. So what I would do right now, since it's April, if you've had a professional come turn on your sprinklers or if you turned them on, I would just leave the controller in off. Okay. And this is assuming you don't have a ET-based controller or call it smart controller. I would just leave it in the off position and wait until you start to see a little bit of plant stress. Then turn it on and start automating with it. But in the spring, a lot of service companies go around, turn on all the irrigation systems, and they don't need to be on. It just fit into the schedule of the service company to go turn them on, and they leave them in auto, but they're still on a schedule. So I would just leave it in off. And we all kind of know when late spring and summer is here, where stuff starts to dry out. We know when that happens. And then I'd flip it to auto, let it run.
So obviously using less water, the only amount that you need is the key. How does zero-scaping come into this?
Well, I think that zero-scaping is an interesting word because it can mean different things to different people. I like to think of zero-scaping as simply drip irrigation, whether that's inline tubing drip irrigation or whether that's micro emitters irrigation. And what we find with landscape is that they're different from the East Coast to the West Coast. Okay, so on the East Coast, we plant high density landscapes. We have foundation plantings right down to the bed edge. Then we have turf grass, very dense plantings. And on the West Coast, you have less dense plantings where you have one plant, 10 feet away, you have another plant, 10 feet away, you have another plant. And so on the West Coast, you have a lot more what we might call xeriscaping because of that. So you're not going to water that entire landscape bed because the plants don't occupy the entire landscape bed. And so you water the specific plant. So you might run some low density polyethylene, you plunge into it, you put an emitter or two on each plant. And that's kind of the difference between the West Coast and the East Coast. And we do see this on the East Coast, drip irrigation and xeriscaping, meaning micro irrigation. But the biggest difference is in the West, where the density of plantings is much further apart. That is the best way to water it, because if you water the entire landscape bed, 50% of that is not occupied by a plant, and therefore it doesn't need to be watered.
To shift gears just slightly, you are a master at marketing. I look at your website. It doesn't look like the typical website. Of course, you've got the podcast. How did you start all that? And what did you use to know what you needed to do?
It's an evolution. So I would say practice. And with that, so in 2004, when I built my first website, some of the easy web building tools of today didn't exist then. And it's a heck of a lot easier to do it today. I would say that I'm just curious. And when I want to know how to do something, I dig right in and figure it out, meaning do the research, read, watch YouTube, try it, get stuck, do some more research, figure it out, implement it, get stuck again, and just repeat. And if you do that long enough over time, you get better and better and better, and things build over time. And that's essentially what happened. I've just been practicing for 20 years.
What have you seen as that evolution was taking place as far as your customer base? What was the feedback that you were getting? What did your sales look like as you were experimenting and doing more to educate them?
So I think that what's interesting is that the market actually changes. So if we were to think about 2004, and if somebody wanted to buy something online, they went to either Google or Yahoo for the most part, and they ran a search. And that is how all eyeballs came to a website 20 years ago. Basically, from Google, from Yahoo, or maybe they typed it in directly. Now we have a lot more places where people are, you might call it hanging out online. People might discover you through YouTube. They might discover somebody through Instagram. They might discover somebody through Reddit. They might discover somebody through all these different platforms that didn't exist back then. And so that to me is basically the fundamental change. Is it's a much more diverse marketplace than it used to be. And what's interesting about these marketplaces is that if you were to price your items, and I guess I'm saying this for anybody listening that might work for a supplier or have a direct-to-consumer product, if you price your product for Google to be, let's say, the lowest price on Google, assuming you sell something that other people sell, then you're kind of giving up margin potentially through all these other marketplaces. And it's a slippery slope and an easy trap to think you need to be the lowest price item, whatever that might be. And it's very easy to run a Google search and find a few competitors and see, oh gosh, I've got to be priced here in order to be competitive. But that's not necessarily true. And we've kind of built our business and a combination to have competitive pricing, not the lowest pricing, because we also need to make money and we need to be able to have some margin in order to make customers happy. It's been an interesting landscape to watch the e-commerce landscape change. And I think that in 2023, distributors are poised they're in the power position. Okay, so I might have opposite thinking of most distributors. They might think they're getting squeezed out, Amazon's taking over. But the person who has access to the product and the product on the shelf is the one that holds, all the cards, if you will. The one who has the product is the one who's in the power position. They can't be cut out. They're just not doing anything about it right now. Some are, some aren't. But as a distributor, there's unlimited e-commerce opportunities right now.
You do a great job of educating your clients on YouTube. How did you start to do that? And you are very polished now. I'm assuming it didn't start out that way in the beginning.
God, YouTube is, okay, just like anything, you get better the more you do it, okay? And we all get in our own way in terms of doing something for the first time because we have a picture in our head of what we want to do. And typically the first time we try something, could be riding a bike. The first time we ride a bike, we might fall off. We can't expect to go win the bike race the first time we get on the bike. You just have to start and try something new and different each time you do it, like a lab, like an experiment, to see what happens, to see if you liked it, to see if the audience liked it. And I'm kind of a believer in trying to make little improvements every single time. Because if you did 100 YouTube videos and you improved one thing each time, then that compound effect of 100 little changes becomes really big at the end. And what's interesting about YouTube is that there are a million questions that somebody could have. And some videos that I've made are answering a specific question. But my primary goal with YouTube is actually to try to bring the human element to the digital world so that when someone is buying from Sprinkler Supply Store, more than ever now, I want them to feel like they're buying from people. Like, who are these people? Do I like these people? Do I believe in these people? Do I trust these people? And I feel like that's missing from the internet. Is on the internet, you're either a picture or a name on a screen, but the actual human part of it isn't there. And I don't see why the digital world has to be any different than the regular world. It's just one world. And part of my YouTube strategy is to try to kind of come out from behind the curtain and say, hey, I'm right here. I'm just a dude. And you have a question? Here, schedule a call with me, to just try to be as human as possible to try to build that sort of authenticity with what we're doing.
If someone wants to find out more about what we're talking about and what I've seen, where should they go?
There's two places they can go. If they go to sprinklersupply.store.com, on the homepage, you'll see a few videos, and those are all embedded YouTube videos. So if they want to watch more videos, they can go to YouTube and our channel, Sprinkler Supply Store. So search Sprinkler Supply Store on YouTube. If you want to hear what I might call my podcast experiment, that's the Sprinkler Nerd Show. And you can find that on all the podcast channels, as well as sprinklernerd.com. You can listen to all the episodes right on sprinklernerd.com.
Excellent. We'll have all of that information on our show notes page as well. Normally, I transition to the lightning round questions with my guests. Same questions I ask of all my guests, but I thought we might do something a little different with you, because you were a participant on one of my all-time favorite shows, and I thought if you were okay with it, we could talk a little bit about your Shark Tank experience.
Absolutely. Love talking about Shark Tank.
All right, so I got to know, how do you get on Shark Tank? What did you do?
So I don't know how you get on it today, but I was crazy enough to think I could just Google how to get on Shark Tank. This was in 2010. And I Googled how to get on Shark Tank. I found some email address. I mean, it was literally like a woman's name at gmail.com. And I just emailed and totally forgot about it. 6 months later, it was about 11 p.m. I was traveling on the East Coast. A phone call came in from an unrecognized number, and I didn't answer it. And then I listened to the message, and sure enough, it was a producer from Shark Tank. So that's what I did. I don't know how you do it today. And I would say the rule probably applies for anything. If you want to do something, just look it up and pick up the phone and call somebody or email somebody.
What did that call go like with the producer?
So what's interesting about Shark Tank is, and again, this was season 2, I felt like they wanted to keep me on the edge of my seat every moment, the whole time, from the first phone call all the way to walking on the stage. It was almost like there's a chance you might not go on the show. Sort of like nothing is guaranteed. If you do well on this next phone call, Andy, then you might get an opportunity to talk to the next producer. So there was this progression of kind of keeping me on the edge of my seat. And then, interestingly, I feel like they wrote the pitch because for about 5 weeks leading up to the taping, I would have a call with a producer. They'd say, all right, Andy, let me hear the pitch. And I'd hear the pitch. And then they'd say something like, the Sharks would really probably like to hear you talk more about, X, and if you could be more passionate about Y. So rewrite that, and then we'll catch up with you in a couple days and hear it again. And so they gave me sort of revisions each time. And by the end, what I had was, this is all in hindsight, in the end, what I had was their pitch.
Interesting.
It wasn't my original pitch. It was the producer secretly crafted pitch that I wrote with their suggestions.
All right, I'm going to ask you about that a little bit later in my question. So now they say this is your taping date. I'm assuming they paid for your travel expenses and you went out to, where do they even tape it?
It was taped in Culver City at NBC Studios, I believe.
So what was that like? What was going there like?
Okay, so the fun part was meeting all these other, inventors, if you will, entrepreneurs. And most of them never got on Shark Tank. That's the other thing that people don't realize is that if 30 people pitch, they might pick 3 to actually go to air. And again, if you think about what are they selling? They're selling entertainment. Mm-hmm. So again, this is my own perception. So please don't think this is actually real. It's just how I view it, is that Shark Tank isn't about the deals. It's only about the deals to entertain the viewers. But the Sharks, they have the whole world of deals coming at them. They don't need the Shark Tank deals. They only need the Shark Tank deals to make the Shark Tank show a show to entertain people. And so what they're really selling is amazing entertainment, which is why you like this show, because it is entertaining. It creates emotion. And they do a great job at that. I have never pitched an investor in real life, but from other people that I have met that are either angels or other startup founders, it's nothing like Shark Tank. It can just be a cup of coffee with an angel telling your story. It's not, a high pressure pitch situation. And a lot of the high pressure pitch situations, which we tend to see in every small town or a lot of small towns, even Traverse City might have a pitch night. It is usually to, build and market the organization running the pitches, but it's not really for funding deals at that moment. It's entertainment.
So you're back off stage. There are 30 entrepreneurs back there. How do they choose who goes on?
Yeah, I wish it was kind of like that. So they also try very hard not to have the entrepreneurs talk to each other.
Oh.
We could talk to each other at the hotel. So we did all stay at the same hotel, and they gave everybody the same amount of money. Okay, so that there's no unfair advantage to one person or another. And if I remember correctly, the gal that, when she was giving out the money, she explained why. And she said that Shark Tank was considered a game show. So like legally, it's a game show. And because it's a game show, there can't be any advantage for one player, if you will, or one participant over another. And so I think they gave us like $500 or something like that. And we could hang out with each other at the hotel, but then we each had sort of a dressing room. I think that's what you call it. It was just a room with one couch, all white walls, and I had to hang out in there all day. I could go down the hall and like have a snack. Then I'd have to come back to like my sort of holding cell before it was pitch time. And then they kind of told us, all right, Andy, you're gonna pitch at 1:00, let's say. And then you do the pitch and they guide you, stand here. Then they'd say, walk around right here and kind of make it look like you're really nervous and you're thinking and you're contemplating to kind of guide you so they could take, sort of some of that B-roll. And then you do your pitch. Then you go back to your dressing room. Then they brought in, I don't know if a therapist, psychologist, they brought in somebody to talk to me to make sure I was in the right frame of mind. I don't know if this is sort of their legal, all right, he's cool. And if he jumps off a bridge, we had somebody talk to him, so we're off the hook, like kind of almost like that. And then immediately I got in a van and went to the airport.
Okay, this is fascinating. I'm so happy I brought this up. I know I've seen your episode, but it's difficult to go back because I don't have a great streaming service, and I wanted to watch that. But if I recall, you did not get a deal.
I did not, correct.
Can you tell us the experience that you had? The doors open, you walk out on stage, and you pitch to the Sharks. What was that like?
Yep, and you're given your lines, right? So you've memorized this pitch that the producers say is going to be great. The investors are going to love it. And you've memorized this. And what I felt like and what I observed while I was giving the pitch was that I felt like there wasn't a lot of active listening. Like we're here on this video call. I can tell you're actively listening to me, but I felt like the Sharks were not actively listening. It was more like they were thinking of something they could say, or maybe they didn't know my exact pitch, but they were looking for something they could say to kind of cause some drama, that emotion, make it entertaining versus actually trying to understand what was being said in the deal. And again, it's television, right? It's reality, but it's highly orchestrated reality. And so I felt like there wasn't a lot of active listening. And it was sort of me just being, I guess, naive. If I wasn't so naive, I would have realized I was walking into a television show that is there for entertainment purposes.
And they were a little harsh on you.
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting because I was into the idea of the business, which what they showed on television wasn't exactly what I was pitching. For me, I had a eco-friendly lawnmower that I trademarked the eco mower, and I wanted to build an environmentally friendly lawnmower company. That's really what I had the budget for, was to build an eco mower to get into the market. And they focused on the mower, right? Why would anybody want to buy a push reel mower? Blah, blah, blah. And I was sort of there saying, well, look, this entire industry is going to be run by electric equipment in the future. This is how I've started. But they focused on the mower part of it, So that's the other thing to remember is I may have been pitching for 30 minutes and they show 5. and they can do what they want with the footage. It's for entertainment purposes, and they do a really good job with the entertainment.
Would you do it again?
I would totally do it again. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a very fun conversation to have. Not that I go out to bars by myself unless I'm traveling, but you can have a fun conversation with anyone because of it.
What would you do differently now that it would be your second experience?
If it was the same product, I would probably do nothing different. And I would focus on making it to television, because most of the people who pitch, and I say most, I don't know if it's most, not everyone goes to air. And I know someone who had a fantastic product. We still keep in touch. He got a deal, $300,000 deal on tape, but never actually followed through, never got the money, never made it on television. But on taping, he had a $300,000 deal. And so the goal is to be on television, whether you are the pawn, whether you're the winner, you just want to make it to television any way possible. And people ask me, did you get a lot of hits to your website? Did that generate a lot of sales? And that was the other thing that I learned, was that I would have thought yes, that would have been an amazing opportunity to sell tons of units. But if I recall, there may have only been 15 or 20,000 visitors to my website over that weekend. Shark Tank airs on a Friday, then you have Saturday and Sunday. Let's say it was 20,000 visits. It's not a lot of traffic at the end of the day. And that was sort of my aha moment, that media isn't about a one-time opportunity. There's a reason we see commercials over and over and over and over and over again, because you'd rather be in front of somebody many times than just here today, gone tomorrow. I saw that once, I never saw it again. You need the repetition. You need to be in front of somebody often.
Well, it seems like you took what you learned from that and you started applying that to your own firm with all the marketing that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had already started Sprinkler Supply Store that same year. Yeah, I started Sprinkler Supply Store June of 2010, and we taped for the show in November 2010, and then it aired in 2011. But you're exactly right. So I took what I learned about e-commerce, and the EcoMower was my third e-commerce business. And then I said, all right, how can I do this for my industry? I know distributors, I know the products. How can I take my e-commerce knowledge and apply it to my industry? And that's when I started Sprinkler Supply Store.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. That was fascinating.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's a great show, highly entertaining.
Andy, once again, if someone wants to find out more about you, where should they go?
I would say go to sprinklersupply.store.com and then visit sprinklernerd.com. Sprinkler Nerd is my podcast, and Sprinkler Supply Store is my e-commerce store. And you can reach out to me directly anytime. Would be happy to talk to you about B2B e-commerce and direct-to-consumer e-commerce, and how you might be able to layer that on top of a wholesale distribution company, as well as irrigation technology, and how you might be able to provide some better sensors and data analytics right at your commercial building to try to reduce your water usage.
Andy, thank you so much for coming on the Scaling Up H2O podcast.
Thank you, Trace. Really appreciate it.
Scaling Up Nation, my favorite thing, hands down, is meeting new people. And I met somebody brand new right here on the podcast. And of course, we learned a lot about Andy, and we learned a lot that we can do to help our customers understand that water savings is not just what we do with their chillers and boilers. It's also everywhere that they use water. And I hope now you're thinking outside of the regular box, that we are trying to save water wherever we can. And of course, everything we do is to help our clients succeed. And now we have even more information to do just that. Nation, have you ever heard the expression, if you're a carpenter, everything looks like a nail? It's my hope that that little saying is not how we're living our lives. It's not how we are performing our incredible services. We're looking at the base knowledge that we know, and we are trying to help our customers apply that knowledge to everything within their facility. So don't just stop at the equipment that you treat. Our job is to be the biggest ally that we can for our customer. And we know more about water than probably anybody else that will ever walk through their door. So don't let it stop just in the mechanical room. Make it be a catalyst to make our customers wildly successful, to help them with all of their water decision making. Now, that being said, I'm not saying you have to be the ones to do everything. And I think the more you do outside of what you are good at and your company's core business is probably the worst you get at your core business. So I'm not saying that. I'm saying you're the catalyst of that information, and you can drive them towards other resources, whether it's information or maybe it's other contractors that you are working with. So you might be saying, Trace, I am a boiler expert and I know boiler water. Where am I ever going to use what I just learned about irrigation? Well, just think of how many irrigation companies are out there and how many of those companies have potential customers for you. So maybe an idea from this episode is you reach out to one of these companies and you let them know what it is that you do and this podcast that you just listened to, and how can you collaborate with them, and now maybe you guys can help each other. Just an idea. And that's what I hope this podcast does for you. It allows you to think about your job differently. It gives you an idea, but I hope it doesn't stop there. I hope that that idea now allows you to go further with the idea. And if you can imagine the idea being a dot on a map and then spider webs from ideas just coming out of that one dot, is what I think this podcast allows to happen. I think everybody does something a little bit different with that information. And you've heard me say on past podcasts, it's my hope that this podcast unlocks your ability, your desire to find out why, and everybody's going to take that journey a little bit differently. So I'm curious, how are you going to take this information? How are you going to make it your own? How are you going to be successful? And as always, our friend James McDonald is trying to make us more successful and more knowledgeable each and every week. Here is a brand new periodic water table with James.
Hello and welcome to the Periodic Water Table with James, where we think and learn about water chemistry drop by drop. Please use your week to search online, ask your colleagues, or even pick up a book to learn more about each week's periodic water table topic. If you do, at the end of the year, you'll be 52 water chemistry smarter. So let's raise the water table of knowledge together and get started. Today's topic is Fenton's reagent. Some of you may be thinking I made this one up, but no, I haven't. Fenton's reagent. What is it? What chemicals are involved in the Fenton reaction? What are the chemical reactions happening? When and where would one use Fenton's reagent? What dosage ratios between components are recommended? Do low and high pH have an impact upon the reaction? Conversely, will Fenton's reagent have an impact upon water pH? What is a hydroxyl radical and how is that different from the hydroxide ion? Remember, knowledge is power, and taking the time to learn more about water chemistry each week will help make you a force to be reckoned with. Be sure to post what you learned to social media and tag it with hashtag WaterTable23 and hashtag ScalingUpH2O. I look forward to learning more from you.
Thank you, James. Nation, once again, my call to action is for you to take this knowledge and do something with it. Maybe think a little bit differently, maybe meet somebody new, maybe educate a customer about how you can help them. Nation, it is always my pleasure to bring you this podcast each and every week, and I'll have a brand new one for you next week on Scaling Up H2O. Scale Up Nation, you asked for it and it is here. So many of you are taking the Certified Water Technologist examination and you're wanting to get better information on how to better answer the mock exam. Now, this is the exam that you get when you sign up for the CWT exam. Well, I have heard your request and I've done exactly that. I have recorded a class that has exactly what you've been asking for. It is me answering each one of the questions and letting you know why I chose certain answers. And of course, everybody wants me to do math, and I do all the math on the mock exam. So you can see how to get the right answer. And I hope this is something that will help build your confidence so you can get your certification. You can go to scalinguph2o.com/CWT prep. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/CWT prep. Get out there and get your certification today.